call the Francis House School District Board of Education meeting to order. This evening, we are going to have the Pledge of Allegiance led by the Pathways to Teaching cadet teachers. Please join us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lang, seconded by Mrs. Lang, by roll call.
Mrs. Lang?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 6-0. Next on our agenda, we have recognitions. Mr. Leichman.
Thank you, Mrs. Cope. Tonight, we would like to recognize the members of the Proposition Learn Campaign Committee. These individuals volunteered countless hours in this important effort. Will the members of the campaign committee please come up? The committee's leadership, vision, and organization were commendable. We were originally going to recognize the committee members last month, but the hashtag #StillTooSoon was used more than once. I'd like to introduce the Prop Learn Committee co-chairs, Chris Newman and Jen Jungers. Chris?
Thank you, Matt. Those of us who volunteered for the Proposition Learn Committee did so because we know how important it is for our kids that Francis Howell remains an excelling, great school district. Prop Learn was intended to provide funding to increase student technology, add innovative courses, hire more staff to support struggling students, update classroom materials, fund extracurricular activities, and to increase staff compensation after 2 years of frozen salaries. But Prop Learn did not pass. But it was not because of a lack of effort. So thanks to all of you who assisted in this important work. Thank you for what you did on behalf of our students and our school district. Thank you.
Up here, guys. We've got to take our group picture. You can do that, yeah, it's fine. What do you want? You big-
You'll leave us out?
No,
Some of them are sticking.
you could have held any one of them. You could make
I know,
a
right?
picture.
I'll stand up here. Thank you. Thank you for your hard work.
Andrew Tollefson, a junior at Francis Howell North, has been awarded the 2017 Youth Leadership Award. Organized by the Governor's Council on Disability, the Youth Leadership Award recognizes young adults who demonstrate their leadership abilities by going above and beyond in their community. You guys want to come on up? Andrew? Andrew? Andrew was chosen for the award based on his involvement in a wide variety of activities that improve the quality of life for people within the state of Missouri who live with disabilities. Not only is Andrew a force to be reckoned with academically, perfect attendance since the 6th grade, a near 4.0 GPA, and a repeat honor roll member. Andrew is extremely active in extracurricular activities. He's a member of the Knights of Excellence and the We Are All Knights Club. He mentors students and serves as a tutor at Henderson Elementary. Outside of school, Andrew's found other ways to advocate. He's been a guest reporter on Fox 2 News, and he's also advocated for people with disabilities on The Thread, a local television show dedicated to building and serving the St. Louis community. Constantly pushing forward and advocating for those with different abilities, he has positively influenced the lives of many individuals. Andrew Tollefson.
So you guys come on the other side of Mary. One more. Thank you. Chad, did you give it back?
Yeah, I gave it to him.
Thank you, Mrs. Coe.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Dykeman. Next on our agenda is patron comments. So during our patron comments, patrons are invited to address the Board of Education. Please come up to the podium so everyone can hear. Please adhere to the 3-minute time limit. The board is interested in hearing the public's concerns and opinions, but we do not answer patron questions during the meeting. Questions and concerns will be addressed by Dr. Mary Hendricks Harris and other appropriate staff members. Please remember that comments about individual students and staff are not allowed due to confidentiality. These concerns need to be brought to the administration's attention and may be brought to the board in closed session. So with that, so I am terrible with last names, so please bear with me. First we have Carla Ludke.
Hi, my name is Carla Ludke, and I've been with Francis Howell since 2005 and fully intended to retire here. I have invested my heart and soul into serving students and families, and I do this willingly, as do many other teachers here tonight. I do this because I'm passionate about what I do. I'm not building widgets. I have little children's valuable lives in my hands. However, I made the gut-wrenching decision to turn in my letter of resignation, and I feel an obligation to make you aware of why. Over the last several years, I've become increasingly concerned with the direction the district is headed on multiple fronts. And although I'm not here to discuss teacher salaries, I'm in full support of the actions being taken and proudly stand with teachers here tonight. I am concerned about the lack of respect for the voice of teachers, the curriculum that is driving anxiety through the roof for students, the lack of support from the community and this board that has led to ridiculous and unmanageable caseloads for our special education teachers and paraeducators that support them, and the stressful environments that have been created in many of our classrooms due to escalating student behaviors and the way they are managed. I have been teaching kindergarten within the district since 2009, and in that time have seen a dramatic shift in the demands placed upon teachers and students. We have continued to push down curriculum as though it were a logarithm that could be created simply by starting at high school graduation and working backwards at an even pace to determine what children should know, regardless of whether it's developmentally appropriate. It's not. This is not the way children develop. Just because they're capable of learning it does not make it appropriate or the right thing to do. Young children learn through play. Research has shown over and over again that this is the most effective and efficient way for children to construct their knowledge, yet we refuse to accept that in our elementary schools. We continue to force them to sit at tables or desks for extended periods of time, have a working snack so that they don't lose precious minutes of instruction, do nightly homework after an already long day, and in many kindergarten classrooms no longer have any time for rest. This highly academic-focused curriculum allows not 1 minute for the social and emotional development of our children and is creating tremendous gaps in critical foundational skills. They are not learning how to cooperate, take turns, resolve conflicts, have empathy, manage strong emotions, all things I will remind you that every employer wants in an effective employee. And what about the joy of learning? It's evaporating. It's all about scores and data. Our children are reacting. They are telling us by the only means they have, escalating behaviors that may be aggressive and physical, or worse, may be turned inward as anxiety, stress, and apprehension. As other students are exposed to these behaviors, we are creating social norms that say it's okay to behave and feel this way. It must be. It happens all the time. These are adult problems in the laps of children, and we are culpable. Add to these concerns the societal changes our students face with social networks, technology advances that cut both ways, and busy parent work schedules. There needs to be a paradigm shift. Francis Hall prides itself on being forward-thinking and innovative. Why are we ignoring the need to be bold and take a stand for our children? I am not leaving because I want to. Teaching is not what I do, it's who I am. I simply cannot align what I'm doing with what's good for kids. I hope that you'll respect your teachers and listen to their voice.
Hi, I'm Leland Truitt. I've been a resident of Francis Howell School District for 27 years. In fact, I remember when Mr. Wayne was the coolest second grade teacher at Henderson. I'm here representing St. Charles County Action Network. SCAN is a local group working for social justice in St. Charles County. In light of the recent racist promposal, we would like to say thank you for the opportunity to foster productive conversations with our young people regarding racial climate. We want to turn anger into advocacy, and we need your help. The decisions made by the administration by way of corrective action gives us hope that we can work together as parents, students, and community for a better understanding of our cultural and racial differences. Cross-cultural relationships thrive on being open-minded and respectful of our nation's racial divisive history. We need more conversations and more education. As active participants in our school district, we sincerely petition the board to keep the conversation going at all schools within the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Gregory Upchurch.
Hello everyone, my name is Greg Upchurch. I know several people in this room to recognize who I am. I'm just here for an introduction real quick. I'm running for the House District 70, which is out here in Harvester and across the river. So everything you can find about me is at my website. I don't want to waste your time. Upchurch for Mo. Upchurch for Mo on the Facebook and upchurchformo.com on the website. Thanks. And I support teachers. I taught subs for a long time and I have a master's degree.
Next we have Peggy Sherwood.
Good afternoon. My name is Peggy Sherwin, and I'm here to speak on behalf of our teachers. I've lived in this area for more than 20 years. I've been an educator for longer than I've lived in this area. I would like to see you return to the table to discuss the wages of our teachers. I have a granddaughter who attends Francis Howell Central High School. And since she has been here, she has definitely turned around and gotten into her educational studies. When I moved here, I heard about Francis Howell. Francis Howell is the best school in the district. Francis Howell, if you have any children, send them to Francis Howell. When my granddaughter came, that's the school that we went to because we live in the district and we wanted her to go to one of the best schools here. I'm asking you, where did the face come from? To let everyone know that I run into Francis Howell is the place to send your children. Who put that face on that message? Where I stand, those people in blue put the face of that message so that we know that our kids are getting a good education. I've been in schools where that did not happen, and there were not sincere, honest teachers that were working for the benefit of the students. And I ask you, please, rethink this situation. Everyone is losing here. There are no winners. The only way that we can win is to make sure that our children get the proper education, to make sure that when they go away to school, they come back to our communities. If we are not giving them a living wage, they're going to go somewhere else. I would like to see our children come back and live in our communities and carry on the tradition of Francis Howell School being the best school in our district. Thank you.
Sorry, it's been an emotional road color through the last day of school. I'm gonna try my best not to cry, but I can't make promises. I worked side by side with many members of the school board and the admins and teachers on the Prep Learn Committee. I grew very close to a lot of them. When I became part of this, I hate to say community because at my kids' school we're a family. And it was such a beautiful thing. And now it feels like there's such a divide. And I hear the love that those people have for the teachers. And I hear the love that the community and us parents have for you guys. And it's tearing us apart. And we really need to find a way to come back together and make that beautiful magic that Francis Howell and our schools have. And I hope moving forward, there can be an open line of communication and just get back to the beautiful place that we were.
Next, we have Renee Cope. So good evening. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Renee Cope, and I'm a volunteer in the district. Tonight I would like to speak to you from my personal perspective. Please stand up if you worked on any of the 3 previous tax levy requests. Stand if you were a building leader, knocked on doors, held signs at a polling location, contacted your friends and family, and posted about it on social media. If you are here to protest the board's decisions on teachers' raises and are not standing, I do not understand. For those of you who are standing, look around. These are the people who are working hard to do positive things for our district. We are all in this together, and I do not make light of that. I hope you don't either. Thank you. Please be seated. If you did work on one or more of the levy requests, ask yourself why. Did you do it because you just had extra free time? Or did you do it because you knew the district needed additional financial resources? I'm personally very upset the tax levy request did not pass. You may be too, and I respect that. I just ask that you make sure your frustration and anger are focused on the right things. I am upset with the 63% of our parents that did not come out to vote in the last election. I am upset with the 2/3 of our community that are not connected to our schools and either did not vote or didn't support the levy request. I'm upset with the no tax people because they don't understand what their taxes really buy for them, including the future of our children and our community. I am not upset with the people in this room that have worked so hard on their own time to try to better the district by securing additional funding. However, a small group has chosen to vilify the Board of Education. They have made fun of and ridiculed the very people who have fought for them. A few people are bullying their fellow teachers because those teachers believe a step in lanes in this financial situation is acceptable. I'm saddened by the stories I'm hearing and the things I have witnessed, by the half-truths, the things that are being taken out of context, the lies, and the completely made-up stories. For instance, I have never participated in even a conversation about removing children of teachers that don't live in our district from our schools.
If your time's up, why are you still talking?
A few,
still has time.
my time is not up.
Where's your
Timer. It's not.
We will maintain order in the meeting.
I object.
A few people are looking to drive wedges instead of build bridges. You can't carry a message about retaining the best educators when some of them are acting this way. A couple of weeks ago, the Board of Education initiated a step and lanes for our teachers.
Not everyone.
Tonight, the board is going to vote on approving the FISPA contract, increasing substitute pay, and increasing extra duty pay. All of this along with looking after the safety of our buildings, the quality of our technology, and future-focused curriculum. It's very difficult with our current revenues. You have a group of 7 unpaid volunteers who are doing the best they can. They are educated and informed. They make very difficult decisions, and none of them woke up this morning and said, I am against teachers. You may or may not agree with the board. You may not be happy with the steps in lane. I agree with you. I wish teachers were paid like professional athletes. However, I believe a step in lanes are a reasonable increase based on the current situation in the district. A good friend of mine told me that it is easy to be a good leader during good times. A true leader can lead when it is difficult. I am here to ask you what kind of leader you want to be in your building, your classroom, and your community. Thank you.
I don't respect the board.
Thank you. Next on our agenda, we have FHEA comments.
Privilege.
Good evening, President Coe, members of the Board of Education, Dr. Hendricks Harris, and Executive Cabinet. Another year has come and gone. As we reflect on all the good things that occurred this year, the students in this district have received the very best education they could get without feeling many cuts of staff and interventions. Why? Because your staff wouldn't allow it. Our graduating students in all 3 high schools accumulated $35 million in scholarships. Let me repeat that. Our graduating students in all 3 high schools earned $35 million in scholarships. How does that happen? It's your staff. Your highly qualified, highly educated, highly dedicated educators that have made this happen. We have strived for many years in this district to work collaboratively. So to have our negotiations end with you imposing our salary schedule is very disheartening, because we can do better. How do we know that? By looking at tonight's financial statement on the board docs, you're going to be asked to approve $2.4 million of technology and supplies. We can continue to order and buy as much as you want, but without the best educators working with our students, it's pointless. As the FHEA president, on behalf of our teachers, I'm here again to ask the Board of Education to go back to the negotiating table, collaboratively and in good faith, with a different ending. We need to protect the quality of our classrooms by making sure that everything that is needed to educate our students is there. We need to prioritize hiring the best educators and keeping the best educators. Most of all, we need to educate the students that sit in front of us, the ones that are here now. They deserve it. Thank you.
Good evening, President Coe, members of the Board of Education, Dr. Hendricks Harris, and Cabinet. My name is John Davis, and I'm the president of Francis Howell Education Support Staff Association. On Saturday, May 12, 2018, the negotiation team presented to the general membership the tentative agreement. We are here to inform you the tentative agreement was ratified. We would also like to thank each and every certified staff for another great school year. You are the one most dedicated, caring individuals, and it is a pleasure working with each and every one of you, knowing that you have the full support of FESPA. Thank you.
Thank you. SAA? All right. Next on our agenda is the consent agenda. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Lang, seconded by Mr. Lane. By roll call.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 6-0. Next on the agenda is the MSBA April Board Report.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association's Board Report for the month of May. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at budgeting challenges facing Missouri's public schools. While state funding for public education through the foundation formula has increased in recent years, there remains concern about the availability of state revenue to fund public education in future years due to tax cuts approved by the General Assembly. Former Deputy Commissioner of Education, Dr. Ron Langford, says a major budget challenge on the local level is having a reasonable expectation of available revenue from state and local sources.
There is an appropriation, and the General Assembly will appropriate, but they cannot distribute more than what they have. And so an appropriation, there's certainly we should have a lot of gratitude for an appropriation, but if the revenue's not there going forward, than its ability to meet the appropriate level. We've seen that many times, that they couldn't meet that. So yes, it's always something we should watch.
Langford adds, state funding for school transportation has dropped dramatically over time.
If you look at the amount that was appropriated last year and the amount that was spent, which was $85 million, you have to go back about 35 years before it fell to that level. But if you look at a school bus 30 years ago, the cost of one compared to now. So what happens if you gain appropriated funds through the foundation formula, but the monies for transportation or the cost of transportation continue to go up, then you're really just, instead of funding transportation, you're funding transportation now through the foundation formula or through local tax increases.
State law sets a target of providing 75% of the cost of school transportation to local school districts. But right now, state funding is at about 30%, forcing local school districts to pick up a greater share of transportation funding. Langford discussed school funding issues during the recent Partners in Governance conference in Columbia. MSBA was a co-sponsor of the event, along with the Missouri Municipal League, the Missouri Association of Counties, and the Truman School of Public Affairs at the University of Missouri. Registration is now open for the 2018 MSBA Leadership Summit to be held June 2nd and 3rd at the Lake of the Ozarks. The theme of this year's event is Accountability in Leadership, and will feature a number of general session speakers and breakout sessions related to that theme. The Leadership Summit also includes recognition of board members achieving the various levels of certification through MSBA, along with the Outstanding Boards of Education Awards. The June Delegate Assembly also meets during the Leadership Summit, where MSBA state officers are elected. This year's state officer nominees for the coming year are Rhonda Gilstrap of the Blue Springs Board of Education for President-elect, and Linda Doherty of the Nixa Board of Education for Vice President. Mike Pratt of the Gasconade County R1 Board of Education will become the new president of MSBA at the conclusion of the Leadership Summit. He served as president-elect during the past year. By the way, Mike Pratt also was elected to a seat on the National School Boards Association's Board of Directors during the recent NSBA conference held in San Antonio. Video interviews with the candidates are posted on the MSBA website, in addition to registration information for the Leadership Summit. Nominations are now being accepted for MSBA's Legacy of Leadership Awards. The Legacy of Leadership Awards are designed to honor current and former Missouri school board members who have distinguished themselves through community service and advocacy for public education. Honorees are outstanding Missourians who have given countless hours for the betterment of their communities and to advocate for the students in our public schools. These awards are sponsored by Future Builders, the nonprofit foundation of the Missouri School Boards Association. The Carter D. Ward Excellence in Advocacy Award is designed to recognize and honor an individual board member who exhibits exemplary leadership skills in the area of public education advocacy. The award is named for former Missouri School Boards Association Executive Director Dr. Carter D. Ward, whose career epitomized effective advocacy for public education. The Paul Morris Community Service Award was established to recognize and honor an individual school board member from Missouri, past or present, who has shown a sincere and outstanding commitment to community service. That award is named in honor of Paul Morris, a past president of MSBA, who devoted countless hours to strengthening his community and improving its schools through his volunteer work. Applications for both awards are open until June 28th and are posted on the Future Builders section of the MSBA website. Both awards will be presented at MSBA's annual conference this fall. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
Next on our agenda is the academic high target area. So board, we have curriculum review. It's a first reading on several topics. Please make sure you do review that information. Our best practice for this evening is teaching career pathways. Dr. Greiner.
Good evening, friends. It's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Kate McGuire and her cadet teachers from Francis South Central. special thanks to Kate and her students for being here on the heels of the last day of school. So what better way to celebrate the beginning of summer break than coming to a board meeting? So I'll turn it over to Kate.
Good evening. Like Dr. Greiner said, my name is Catherine McGuire, and I'm a classroom teacher at Francis House Central High School. I'm just going to kind of tell you a little bit about the course, and then I'm going to leave the video and my students to speak for it. So the course is broken down into 2 different sections. First semester is 1 hour of the day. We go over like general overview of what is education, what does teaching look like, what does practice look like, all of that kind of stuff. And then second semester, my students are actually placed out in the field with a certified district teacher where they job shadow them for the entire semester. They create lessons, they do interventions, they work with small groups, so on and so forth. So they really can get the feel of what it's like to be a teacher. Currently, we apply all the 21st century learning skills. My students get to gain clarity whether or not they actually want to pursue the field of education. They get to analyze and evaluate different information, and they get to have real hands-on practical information that we so often don't get to do in high schools because we do so much in a book or on a computer, and we never actually get to apply it and get our hands dirty and get into it. And so my students actually have the opportunity to do this, which is really awesome. Next year, there are some new things coming with the program. We are going to expand into the field of counseling, OT, PT, that direction. Therefore, that will open up avenues for more areas for my students to job shadow. My students are also going to be able to earn dual credit next year through several different colleges, and they are going to have the opportunity to earn a conditional honors point for the course. So I am going to leave it to my students to speak, and then we can go ahead and do the video. First I have Gabe Delgado, then, I'm sorry.
No, it's not.
Okay, then first I have Gabe Delgado, then Brianna English, and then Gabby Soto.
Hello. Pathways to Teaching has been one of the most important, if not the most important classes I've ever taken. It's given me important social skills to help me in my everyday life and also help me to solidify the decision to pursue a degree in education. This is the class that prepares students today for success tomorrow, and it's been my honor to attend it every day. Thank you.
One second, I'm sorry. So, Pathways to Teaching has been the best part of my senior year. I almost graduated early, but I decided to stay for this class. Through the help of my classmates, Ms. McGuire, and my cooperative teacher, and the students I worked with, I have found my teaching voice. This class teaches you to not only be confident in yourself, but in the lessons you plan and execute, and and how you speak with students and other staff. Lastly, I have made a positive personal growth from this class that will help me in my future endeavors as I go to college to become a kindergarten teacher. Thank you.
Pathway to Teaching prepares you for what it's like to be a teacher. We pick grade level that we want to teach, and 4 days a week we go to our school. I love helping kids, but by the end of the program I didn't want to leave. I made so many great connections with students. I've learned so much from this program, and I'm excited to learn more next year. Thanks.
Pathways to Teaching is an amazing course. You get to work with tons of cool people, do amazing things, and really help people.
If you want to become a teacher, I would highly recommend taking this class. You learn so much feedback. You learn on how to roll with the classroom, how to learn with other students. It's just so much fun, and you get to just experience it in real life.
The Pathways to Teaching course is broken down into 2 different sections. There's first semester, which is the foundations. We learn all about teaching as a career itself. We learn about education as a whole. And then second semester is an internship in which the students actually leave school 4 days a week, and they're placed with a certified district teacher, and they actually job shadow that teacher. They get real life, hands-on experience. It's outside the class.
It really is the highlight of my day every day. I get to interact with the kids, I get to learn. I learn more from the kids probably than they learn from me. How they learn, what I can do to help them learn better. Classroom management is also a big deal. You have to go around the class and make sure that no one is really acting out, and use proximity with kids, get close to them when they are acting out, and just try and reset the class back to learning.
So many classes in high school are about opening a book and finding the answer, or going online and doing research. And that is great and valid at certain times. However, we need students to have real-life, practical application of material. And we know that the highest form of learning is actually teaching it out.
I figured if I did want to become a teacher, right here would be a good place to start before I go off to college, blow a ton of money, and then
I personally have learned so much from this class, from working with my mentor teachers, from working with Ms. McGuire.
I want to foster the growth of students to be the best that they can be in the classroom, and to realize that they should never stop learning. This job is more than just a job. This career is about helping people. This is about fostering a child's natural love of learning. This is about making things relevant. This is about guiding and mentoring and coaching. Our future generations depend on people now currently moving up the path, and so we really need strong people that are going to advocate for the public education system and the students that are in it that deserve the best possible education, and that starts with hiring the best possible teachers for those students.
If you want to be a teacher, I highly recommend to take this class because it's so much fun. You learn about the field, you learn about the kids, you learn about different strategies to use in the classroom, and it's so helpful when you go into college where you have to do observations. You already have your observation, you already know what you're looking for, you already have teachers that know and give you feedback on how you are teaching currently.
So they are applying all the 21st century learning skills to their day-to-day life, in addition to getting the practical information that is going to either solidify their choice to go into education or solidify their choice to say, hey, I'm not cut out for this, this is not for me, I need to find something else.
honestly, teaching, if only because you get to inspire kids and give them lifelong lessons that they will cherish forever. I think it makes this teaching one of the most noble jobs you can have.
Because watching the students learning come alive, I would love to come up with some great descriptive adjective for it, but it's not going to happen. You just have to experience it. It's the adjective.
Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Board, do you have any questions? I think you covered a lot of great information.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Board, next on the agenda is the section of fiscal responsibility. First in that area is the FESPA closure document. So I would entertain a motion to approve the 2018-2019 FESPA closure document as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Hain, seconded by Mr. Lang. Mrs. Simpkins.
Thank you, Mrs. Coe. We just want to thank the FESPA negotiation team for coming to the table, the board and the administrators who were there. We did come to a one-year agreement in our negotiation process. A lot of problem solving and good conversation has happened over the year in our labor management teams, and so that really did help our negotiations go smoothly. As Mr. Davis shared, the membership of FESPA has ratified the agreement, and so we present it here today with you. All of the changes were highlighted in yellow, so that would make it easy for the board to see those. And we just recommend approving the agreement.
Great, thank you very much. Board, any discussion? By roll call.
Mr. Lang?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries 6-0. Board, I'll entertain a motion for a 5-minute break to sign the FESPA closure document.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lang, seconded by Mrs. Lang. By roll call?
Ms. Stiglich?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 6-0. We'll take a 5-minute recess. recommendation. Board will entertain a motion to approve the extra duty salary recommendation for the 2018-2019 school year as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lang, seconded by Mrs. Stiglich. Mrs. Simpkins.
Thanks, Mrs. Coe. So as you may be aware, our extra duty salary schedule has been frozen for the last 3 years, and we knew that we were struggling to keep up with benchmark districts in this area. So I'd like to thank Anita Kina for working with me very closely, and we have done quite a bit of study with some other benchmark districts to bring forward this proposal today. We know that there still is some work to be done as we move forward with our extra duty stipend schedule, but together we feel this is a good first step in making sure that we have competitive stipends for our coaches and sponsors.
Great, thank you, Mrs. Simpkins. Board, any questions, comments? Okay, by roll call.
Mr. Hain?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 6-0. Board entertain a motion to approve the 2018-2019 pay increases for the support staff salary schedules as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Lang, seconded by Mr. Lane. Mrs. Simpkins.
Thank you. So this recommendation is for those employees that are not organized and have not been approved yet by the Facebook closure document. And so we are recommending a salary increase that is commensurate with those that you've already approved. Also included in that are a couple of a pay grade review that we have researched and reviewed and are recommending a change on the support staff salary schedule. Also, we are recommending an increase in the substitute pay for our support staff substitutes. We expect that that cost will be about $8,000 to $9,000, bringing each and every one of our support staff substitutes up to 95% of the entry-level wage of the position that they're subbing in. So we're hopeful that this will allow us to address some of the no-fills that we have with our paraprofessionals and be able to provide some support when our staff is absent with great quality substitutes in those support roles. The total cost of our salary increases for all non-certified staff, including our tuition-based staff members, will be an effect on the budget of about $1.2 million with the increase that we're asking for the entire non-certified group. We did take into consideration this increase when we looked at the tuition rates for our tuition-based program, and so that has been reflected in how that tuition rate was set.
Thank you very much. Board, any questions? By roll call.
Mrs. Lang?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 6-0. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the substitute teacher pay schedule and additional permanent substitute positions as presented.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Lang, seconded by Mrs. Lang. Mrs. Simpkins.
So as many of you have heard, when we talk about our HRSBC committee meetings, the substitute no-fills for our certified staff have been increasing over the last couple of years, and we have been watching and focusing on this goal for several years, employing many different strategies throughout the course of the years to address the situation. A celebration is that our fill rate is 96.4%, which is much higher than benchmark districts and of the national average. But we know that that percentage has decreased over the last couple of years and puts a lot of stress on our teachers and our staff in the building when we aren't able to fill those positions. And so we come to you tonight with a couple of recommendations and new strategies for the 18-19 school year to help support our staff in making sure that we have good quality substitutes when our teachers need to be absent. One of those is to increase the daily rate of substitute pay. So benchmark districts around the area are at about $94 to $95 per day, and we have been at $90 a day for a number of years. We have not increased our substitute teacher pay since the 2013-14 school year. So we are recommending a $5 increase per day, bringing that rate to $95 a day, so that substitutes don't feel as if they're making less money by accepting a position in Francis Howell. It will keep us competitive with the market, and hopefully they will choose Francis Howell as a place to substitute. Second, we would like to add 6 permanent part-time substitutes to our role. So these individuals will rotate, 3 of them working Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and 3 of them working Tuesday, Thursday on a rotating basis, so that we have 3 substitutes that will report to the ASAP office each morning and be deployed into those areas where we have not been able to fill a position. So they'll kind of be on standby, being very flexible, waiting for us to be able to determine where those no-fills are for the day so that we can send them to those schools. And we're hopeful that with 3 of them each day, we can address the 4.5 average no-fills that we have each day as a good strategy to support our teachers and our staff in the buildings. We are recommending that those individuals do receive a little bit of a higher rate of pay each day because of the flexibility that we'll be asking of them and the commitment that they'll be providing to us and reporting to work each day. And that's reflected in the memo that you see on board docs.
Great, thank you, Mrs. Simpkins. I'm very excited about some of the ideas, as you mentioned, that came out of the HR Strategic Committee, trying to find good ways to resolve this problem. So thank you for your efforts there. Board, any questions, comments? Okay, by roll call.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 6-0. Board, I entertain a motion to accept the donation of $49,000 from Independence Elementary PTO to purchase playground equipment.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lang, seconded by Mr. Lang. I just want to, board on comments for that, I just want to make sure we send a thank you note, Laura, if we could, to the PTO. It's a great gift and excited to implement that at Independence. Board members, any other additional comments or questions? Very generous, thank you very much. By roll call.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 6-0. Board, I entertain a motion to approve the purchases over $7,500 as presented.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Lane, seconded by Mrs. Stiglich. By roll call.
Mrs. Stiglich?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 6-0. Board, I entertain a motion to approve the April 2018 financial statements as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lang, seconded by Mrs. Lang. Mr. Supple, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mrs. Krupp. I'll just wait until the work session.
Okay, good. Board, any discussion? By roll call.
Mr. Hain?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 6-0. Board, I entertain a motion to approve the amendment to the professional services agreement with Hayner Associates Incorporated for Phase 1 Long-Term Facility Master Planning as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Hain, seconded by Mrs. Lane. Mr. Supple.
Mrs. Krupp, we had an opportunity to have a work session with the board, and so in addition to the information that was provided in the briefing paper, I would just share that our plan is to pay for this from the Capital Projects Fund.
Mr. Supple, that is from bond funds, is that correct?
Yes, that would be funds remaining from the 2008 bond issue would cover the cost of this.
Thank you. I noticed in the memo, it talked a lot about Phase 1, so then I'm assuming there's Phase 2. Could you talk a little bit about the differences?
The initial phase will be to develop, as the name would imply, a comprehensive master plan, and the board may at some subsequent point determine that they would like to begin to operationalize some of the recommendations that are made in that master plan, and that would then come as a second phase. So if the determination was made to add security vestibules to all of our schools that don't have them, phase 2 of that would be to develop schematics and drawings that would allow that project to be bid. So this does not involve the development of specific plans to implement any of the recommendations, but rather to take a look at what our needs are and to identify what those may be.
Great, thank you. Board, do you have any other questions? By roll call?
Mrs. Lang?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 6-0. Board, next on our agenda is our strategic planning committee updates. Each of our board members currently sit on the strategic planning committees. This evening we'll be reporting on human resources, facilities, technology, and policy. So at the top of the list is human resources. I do sit on that strategic planning committee. We did hold our last meeting. We are changing the format for next year with our strategic plan that we've approved. So it was our last meeting in that format for this particular strategic planning team. One of the things I'd like to highlight is we've went all over much of the information of our board meeting this evening. It's HR related information, so I don't have much more to report than that. But I would like to highlight that we did go over our diversity focus. So the team has participated with Mrs. Simpkins looking at different ways to increase the diversity of our staff. And so we did a little bit of report out on what that looked like and what efforts were currently in place. We also went over our substitute no-fill activity, which we did talk about this evening. Thank you. And at that time, we had given an update on the various negotiations that were going on. So that's all I have. Any questions on our HR committee for me? Because I'll pass them to Mrs. Simpkins. All right, so next is the facility committee. Mr. Hay.
The facilities committee, we wrapped up, I guess it was basically 2 meetings ago, so I really don't have a lot new other than one of the main things that we approved this evening was the long-term facility master planning, which is something that we were looking into and recommended to the board for approval, so I'm glad to see that was approved. The other thing I'd like to say is we have a lot of very highly qualified people that are experts in their fields, and for them to come in and volunteer their time for our committee and provide us with that level of expertise is just invaluable. So I want to thank all those people that participated in the process. I hope they'll all come in next year.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hay? Thank you. Technology committee, Mrs. Walker is not with us. She's ill this evening. Policy committee, Mr. Lynn.
Policy's pretty easy. We were canceled once again. It'll go into next year, so it should be pretty busy for policies and procedure updates.
Any questions for Mr. Lynn?
Ms. Cope, if you would like a technology committee update, we do have Jason in the audience tonight. I'd be happy to put him on the spot.
That would be
I
great.
tried to send him an email to give him an update, but he's not checking his email in the midst of it.
Oh!
That's a good thing.
Do you have anything you would like to share on the technology committee?
Well, we're on the spot. One of the things we've been working on is technology committees, take a look at our collaborative technology, our interactive smart boards in the classroom. Excuse me. The last 2 meetings that we had, we actually kind of started a pilot program with some of our teachers where we had some of the new MX 275 smart boards and also some of the LED TVs with screen sharing devices. So we took a look at some of our pilot programs that we had in our classes and also some of the research that was out there. Excuse me. So that's really what we were working on.
Great, thank you very much. All right, board, next on our agenda is our work session. Tonight we'll be going over the 2018-2019 budget workshop. We can take a 5-minute recess as we move down to our work session.
get the superintendent certificate. I'll try.
You did. It's so amazing. Make sure you can share it out.
This is why we can't have nice things.
Give me some more corn. Hey. They're muted, but I'm turning sheets. They're on. Are they on now? All right, I'm going to pull a really. Okay, then forget it. No, I'm good. I think we did a good job setting this up. What are you doing? My husband down. Let's be glad I'm not the one doing I opened it. Maybe Mary a little bit. It won't be ornamental. I mean, it will be. It won't be as nice as what she's telling us.
Just trying not to create a bunch of.
No, no. Yeah, that's otherwise that's how I just show That's what they always do, you know? They all get done kind of thing. So that's what it felt like they did to react this show. It's true. Right. Guys, and any advice for me tomorrow? I got my portrait. Oh, it's like a I'm like, who are you talking to? And wear comfy clothes. Don't feel like you don't dress up. I was going to, I told her I wore leggings and a t-shirt and Patrick made fun of me the whole time. And I'm like, you're uncomfortable. I'm not. There's going to be I mean, I have an instant dress, but it's like, I can't like that hang out. Oh yeah, if you're
The other one,
but we're a type of shoe. I mean, if you're seriously sitting in a very good but it's from 8:30 to 6:15. And it's the same thing where you did online. Exact same thing. Oh, great. All right, just in case. You want to check it out? I just need to stay up. Okay.
and I want you limboing underneath that case.
All right, thank you. Oh, now I got it. I don't want to. Got it. I got it.
I'm trying to be helpful.
I don't have it on the one. We can scoot the table closer. I mean, yeah. No, I have nothing to say. There is some cake that wants to be just past the cake. Yeah, we're good. Got yours. Ready? You didn't want to see her play out. Oh, she played. Oh,
No, that's why I pulled this one.
yeah, because I
Let's get this out of the way. Do what? I still want to try to talk to them. They act like they don't.
I'm muting.
When they're in front of other people, you know?
Can we reconvene? Our work session
I
this
would put 'em on
evening is on the 2018-2019 budget workshop. Mr. Supple.
Thanks, Mrs. Cope. I'm going to be up and moving around a little bit, since I'll be referring to some slides here, so a little different than we've done before. So, Mrs. Frame, if you could bring up the PowerPoint, please. Great, thank you. So I want to begin and share some background with the board about where we are and what the history has that led us to this point. So this is a snapshot of the actual financial results for the district, beginning with fiscal year 12 and up through fiscal year 17. So a couple things that I would point out would be that in fiscal year 12, we had a very large surplus, and we ended revenue over expense. And we ended that year with fund balances a little over 30%, almost 31%. As we moved forward, I'll get into some of the points that happened, but you can see that the next year we had nowhere near that surplus, and then in the following year it was smaller yet. And then in fiscal year 15, we had that $10 million deficit. We made a significant number of changes to our expenditure structure. And in fiscal year 16, we had brought that deficit down significantly. And with some additional changes that we made to our expenditures, reducing budgeted items, we ended last fiscal year with a $2.7 million surplus. So it took us a couple of years to right-size the budget, as it were, but we made those very difficult decisions and made some changes to what we were doing. A couple of things that are of note when we take a look at those numbers. We had in fiscal year 15 the loss of that special purpose levy, and that generated about $4 million annually. And that's particularly important because when we look at this chart, so that would have affected the revenue in this year. So even though this was a reassessment cycle, you can see that our local revenue dropped. But that's also the year that we had a significant increase in our salaries as a result of a 6.5% increase that our teachers got that year. So that was a double whammy, that loss of that $4 million of revenue, and then an increase of a significant amount. You can see there in terms of the actual expenditures, about $5 million in additional expense in our salary line item that year. And so those two factors really contributed to what led to that deficit here. We did see our assessed values begin to recover in fiscal year 15, which is a very positive thing. So that was the cycle that brought us back where we're seeing some positive growth in our assessed value. We did make those expenditure reductions, some $12 million in fiscal years 16 and 17. A majority of that was changes to our staffing patterns. So, and through the time framework that's covered here, and this is, we're really just talking now from August 2015 to the end of the fiscal year 17, the time framework that I showed on that previous slide. We did try twice to encourage our community to provide additional financial support, but we were not successful. And then again, we did end fiscal year 17 with a $2.7 million surplus. So that kind of sets the table, if you will, as we lead into what will help us understand the fiscal year 19 budget. So where are we today? I just, this is again that same snapshot of what happened last year. Those are actual audited financial results, and we had about a 22% ending fund balance. So in this current fiscal year, based on our revised budget, and I like to use the revised budget because it's a point in time that we can all look at. Our budget changes a little bit. You know, we approved some budget adjustments tonight, so there are always some changes to the budget, but we take the revised budget as a point in time. And so we know that in November, when we approved the revised budget, that we were going to end this year with some level of surplus. Here it shows about $600,000. I shared with the board at the time that in all likelihood that number would be something greater than $600,000, but based on the information that we knew at the time, and just a couple of months into the fiscal year at that point, that's where we were. So we would still project ending the year at around 21% fund balances, so well within our board policies relative to fund balance. Some notable items about this year's budget would be that we did see growth in our local revenues as a result of reassessment. So this year, not only in addition to the assessed value growth, the consumer price index that really drives what we're able to recognize on existing property was 2.1%. So we finally got to see some more realistic growth in that. In the prior reassessment cycle, which would have been in 2015, we did see some positive growth in our assessed value, but the consumer price index was 0.8%. So it was significantly lower, which diminished the amount of revenue that we could actually recognize as a result of reassessment, because you can only capture whatever the consumer price index is, and that was significantly lower. Our sales tax revenue is relatively stagnant, so the state of Missouri is not in a bad place, but we aren't going gangbusters as reflected in terms of sales tax revenue. We did receive this year, and I spent significant time in March talking to the board about the financial institution tax payment that was way outside of what we have ever seen in the history of the school district, and is just a one-time event, likely not to be repeated. We do expect that there will be an increase in basic state aid even over what we have budgeted. In the revised budget, we based our estimate on state adequacy target of $6,235. The state's currently paying on $6,241, so it was debatable whether the state would be able to maintain that throughout the fiscal year, but it looks like they will. So there would be some slight increase in our basic state aid as a result of fully funding the formula this year. Two of our federal sources of revenue, early childhood special ed and IDEA, those revenue sources really offset expenditures that we've already incurred, and they're dedicated to specific programs. We are seeing already a decline in our transfer student tuition. So the board did adopt a memorandum of understanding with the Normandy Schools Collaborative, so that beginning in January of this year, we accepted a lower tuition rate for the remainder of this fiscal year, about half of what we had been receiving previously. So we did include an estimate of that in the revised budget, and it is reflected in those numbers, but we're beginning to see a decline in that revenue source. And again, we are on track to end the year with a surplus. So we projected that that would happen, and the level of it remains to be determined. This is just a snapshot taken from the financial statements that were shared with the board and approved by the board this evening. So you can see that our revenues are up a little bit over the prior year, and our expenditures are also up a little bit. And so taking a snapshot at April 30th, there is a difference in terms of the level of fund balance between these two fiscal years. And so a couple of things that are important to point out is that part of that is attributable to the fact that we did end last year with a surplus, so that amount carries over. But we also know, that we did budget in that increase in revenue as a result of the assessed value increases and the reassessment cycle. So that is a difference, and it shows up in those numbers, but it was also budgeted, so it's part of our overall story. And then finally, the unknown factor there was that financial institutions tax. We certainly didn't budget that amount, but we also know that it would not be recurring. So then, as we look forward to the preliminary budget for next year, again, this is just the same snapshot of the revised budget for this year as we've looked at previously. And then comparing it year over year, a couple of important things. We expect to see about a $4.6 million deficit based on our current estimates of revenue and expense, and an ending fund balance of a little over 17%, almost 17.5%. Still within the board's policy relative to fund balance, but a little bit lower than what we've seen previously. So as we take a look at what's happening with our revenue, we know that there is going to be some increase in property tax revenue, but it is not a reassessment year. So we don't get the growth as a result of CPI. We only recognize growth in revenue as a result of any new construction that's been added in that year. So we are seeing some growth, and that is included. We are expecting or budgeting that our sales tax revenue will increase slightly. We do get information from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education as to what the per pupil amount might be that they would, based on their estimates of sales tax in the state, and we've included that. Our investment income is increasing. The Federal Reserve has raised interest rates and is on track to have additional increases in their rates, and that does give us an opportunity to earn some income on the funds that we are able to invest during the course of the year. That used to be a rather significant source of revenue for the district back in the days when interest rates were 4.5% or 5%. We're certainly not at that level, but it's a little bit better than the 1/4 percentage point that we saw for quite a while. We also assume in our projections that our financial institution tax will return to the prior year levels. We are not anticipating that that would be repeated. Our county revenue is essentially flat. On the state side, we did budget for an increase in the state adequacy target. The formula, the statute as written, calls it every other year. The state adequacy target is recalculated, and then that recalculated amount is phased in over 2 years. So next year, fiscal year 19, we will phase in the first half of what is the recalculated state adequacy target amount. So we will see an increase in the payment per pupil from the state. And so you heard earlier in the MSBA board report that the legislature did approve full funding for the formula next year, which is based on that higher state adequacy target amount. And so we did have that and are planning on that. We are also able to begin to count a certain proportion of our early childhood ADA in our state aid calculation. That was something that was triggered this year when the state fully funded the formula. So they had previously written legislation that unaccredited school districts could count a portion of their ADA, and then provisionally accredited school districts. And once the formula was fully funded, all districts could begin to count. So we do anticipate that we'll be able to pick up a little bit of revenue as a result of being able to include some early childhood ADA. There are some issues that may yet to be resolved as part of the legislative session. I think an unintended consequence is a interpretation by DESE as to how those students can be counted, and currently the understanding, DESE's understanding is that if you identify a particular cohort of students as the ones that you're going to count, if one of those students were to leave the program for some reason, you wouldn't be able to replace them with another student. So if you counted them in September, but they weren't there in October, you would just lose that kid. And it didn't seem to make sense to anybody, and there's some legislative language that was adopted. Hopefully it will be included in one of the omnibus bills to kind of iron that out. But at any rate, we will be able to see some additional funding for early childhood kids. You also heard in the MSBA report that there are some additional funds that have been appropriated for transportation, additional $10 million. We're still significantly below what the state's obligation is in terms of statutory requirements to fund transportation, but any increase there is a positive sign. And I would echo something that was said in the MSBA report, and that is if you give it to me in the formula, but you pull it away in transportation, we're just playing a little bit of a shell game with the money. So I've got to continue to support all of the operations of the district, including getting our kids safely to and from school. And if we don't get it in transportation funding categorical, I need to provide those funds from other sources. So it does have a significant effect on the district. One of the things that has been mentioned, and one of the reasons that there has been some argument in Jefferson City about the funding for transportation is that has always been kind of the first go-to place for the governor to withhold funds if the governor felt that state revenue would not support what was appropriated. And so they were concerned that they didn't want to provide additional funding for transportation. There was some discussion of providing a larger amount than the $10 million, but I think the General Assembly felt that it would be better to put it in the formula where it's more secure in terms of school districts actually realizing that revenue than to put a larger amount into transportation and potentially have the governor withhold themselves. And then again, just a reminder that our early childhood special ed tends to just offset the expenses that are associated with educating those students. On the federal side, Medicaid is a relatively small portion of our budget, but we do expect our revenues to go up a little bit slightly. We work very hard to capture every opportunity we have to realize revenue there. Our IDEA revenue is relatively flat, and in some of our other title programs, we're actually seeing some decrease in our revenue. But it's important to remember that those revenues are really dedicated to specific purposes and tend to just offset the costs that we've already incurred. So we have very specific programs and services that we support with our title funds, and so as those revenues decrease, we also right-size those programs. Again, we talked about the transfer student revenue earlier, but for next year, we're assuming essentially that we will lose all of our transfer revenue. So the agreement was, with the memorandum of understanding, that for the fiscal year 18, this current school year, the one for us that just ended this afternoon, that the Normandy Schools Collaborative would continue to provide transportation as they were obligated to do under the statute when they were unaccredited. They would continue to provide transportation for students for the 2017-18 school year. And then on a go-forward basis for 2018-19 and beyond, according to the parameters of the MOU, students could continue to elect to attend Francis Howell, but there would be no transportation provided for those students. So given the difficulties that we believe the parents and students would encounter in getting themselves from Normandy to Francis Howell every day, we don't anticipate that we will see many, if any, students who actually are able to attend school and that the NSC would pay us tuition. So we have essentially zeroed out that line item, although we did include a little bit in there, assuming that in some special circumstance, someone who already works in the Francis Howell area may be able to continue to do that, but we don't think it'll be anywhere near the number of students that we've seen in years prior. On the expenditure side, we do have increases budgeted for both our certified and non-certified staff, and again, that comes after having frozen salaries for those groups for 2 years. So we're very happy that we were able to do that. Just this evening, as you know, the board approved the extra duty schedule with the intention to move us a little bit closer to the county median. And as Mrs. Simpson pointed out, we know we have additional work to do in that area, but we were able to allocate a little over $175,000 to address some of the inadequacies in that schedule. And again, reminder to the board that that schedule had been frozen for 3 years, and so we are making up some lost ground in that regard. We do see a change in the allocation from DPEC, how they're using their funds. So there aren't as many funds allocated to stipends, and there are a set of reasons there. And we are expanding our summer school offerings, which does have an impact on our expenditure picture. I will tell you that our summer school programs are break even or have a little bit of a positive benefit, so it's not a negative in any way, but it does show up in our expenditures. On the benefit side, again, as we increase our salaries, our retirement and our payroll taxes necessarily increase. And so there's money budgeted to account for the required increases in those areas. And then we have budgeted a little, about $1 million for medical insurance so that we can continue to offer our employees the same level of benefits that they have and to minimize any impact to them in terms of their out-of-pocket costs. And of course, the board has an agreement with our employees that they need to be able to select individual-only coverage at a particular level with no out-of-pocket expense, and we clearly meet that, but we tried to go a little bit beyond that and make sure that even for those who select family coverage, that the out-of-pocket expense that they experience would not be significantly different than what they've seen in prior years. So we've tried to lessen the impact for the changes in the cost of providing medical insurance for our employees. On the purchase services side, we are seeing an increase in instruction services. We do have some students who need some very specialized services that we're not able to provide here at Francis Howell, and the cost of those is increasing. So those are typically some very involved students, and the cost of providing those services at outside agencies is very expensive. We are seeing an increase in transportation costs. We do have a contractual increase. The 18-19 school year is the last year of our current contract with First Student. We've already had conversation with the board in previous meetings that we will be taking that out to bid this summer. I will be bringing information to the board hopefully at the June 24th meeting, where we will have an opportunity, June 21st meeting, where we'll have an opportunity to share with you the results of the study that was done by school bus consultants to give you an idea of the general efficiency of the current transportation operation here in Francis Howell. But we are, and again, we're providing some additional transportation for our expanded summer school program, and there is revenue that offsets that, but as you take a look at the expenditures only, it does have an impact on that number. Every year we budget our property and liability insurance. We belong to a consortium of school districts and community colleges across the state, and as those results are favorable for the end of their year, they pass any savings that are available back to its members. And so we have been able to realize the last several years some discounts from the calculated rate for our insurance premium. And so this year when we paid our insurance premium and when we calculated our revised budget, we included in the reduced rate, not what we had budgeted in June when the budget was adopted. But for budgeting purposes, I need to assume that there won't be any discount provided because that's an unknown factor at this point. And what or at what level it might be available to us is unknown. So it does cause there to be a several $100,000 increase in expense, and we're very hopeful that we'll continue to see discounts provided to us, and we would share that information with the board as that becomes available. But it does have an impact on the overall numbers in our preliminary budget. On the supply side,
Kevin, can you go back to that slide for a second? I just want to point something out real quick. So I think one of the things the board has heard that is an inaccuracy is about the supply budget and the shuffling of money in this area. So I just want to point out here that because of the DESI coding requirements, money has been moved to supplies that was previously in purchase services, and that our purchase services have increased, not our supplies.
Thank you.
and so as we, and we'll have maybe an opportunity to look at that again, but I would just follow up with what Dr. Hendricks-Harris said, and that is that the shifting based on how DESI is causing us to record that on our financial statements is masked to some degree by some of the expenditure increases that we're seeing in the purchase services area. So purchase services, if you just look at the comparison year over year, it appears to be relatively flat. There's some growth, but it's very minimal. But we have a 3% increase in transportation, which is a fairly significant dollar amount. But because we're moving some of what was previously budgeted in purchase services to supplies, it masks the difference. So there appears to be a greater increase in supplies, when in fact, if you take a look at those things together, it's the things that are driving our expenditures are the ones that I have indicated here. And it does cause a little bit of a difference. And I shared with the board in our financials memo in prior months, you can already see that we're beginning to make that transition, and that the comparison for that line item will become difficult until we get a couple of years of data so that we can see. But it does have an impact on what's happening. We are budgeting a little bit more for textbook expenditures, particularly to support the Lucy Calkins reading program. So we are continuing to roll that program out in a very systematic way, and there will be materials that are being purchased to support that expansion of our program there. We're expecting that there'll be some increase in the cost of electric, and we spend a couple $1 million a year on electric, so a little bit of an increase is a big number. And then we are budgeting an increase for the purchase of additional both instructional and administrative computers. We have entered the second year of our tech refresh cycle. We had paused that cycle for 2 years. That was part of the $12 million of cuts that we had made. But we have become very dependent on instructional technology. It's integral to what we're doing, and we needed to be able to provide the devices so that our students could access the curriculum appropriately. Outside of the operating funds, some other items of note. In our capital projects fund, we have budgeted projects around $2 million. We have existing fund balances in the capital projects fund that will help to support those. And some of the timing of that work will actually determine what actually gets spent. We may budget to do a particular project, but by the time we bid it out and get the work done, some of them may fall into overlap 2 fiscal years, and that is a fairly typical occurrence. But we have the funds available to pay for the projects that we have budgeted. On the debt service side, our current debt service requirements, so in the fiscal year 19, what we actually owe will be about $1.5 million more than what we're generating with our 67-cent levy in the current year. But we do maintain a balance in our debt service account, specifically to account for those types of fluctuations in the debt service schedule. And so we're not in any danger of not making our principal or interest payments, but on a current basis, we are not generating enough revenue to cover the current debt service payments. Now, as we move forward, because of the way when the debt was acquired and when they're being paid off, in several years, we're going to see a fairly rapid drop-off in our debt service schedule, just as those bonds for the buildings that were built in the late 90s are maturing. We'll see a fairly rapid drop-off, and there could be a real synergy there. Earlier tonight, we got approval to proceed with long-term facilities planning. I imagine there will be some fairly significant projects that will be identified, and that would give us some opportunity to be able to have a no tax increase bond issue that would provide the funding to actually support some of the projects that would be identified in terms of the long-range plan. And then I do want to point out that we have added a facility usage fund. The board earlier this year approved a new revenue strategy, which is to take a very business-like approach to renting out our facilities, both our buildings and our grounds. And Mr. Marvin Thomas Anderson has been hired into that position. Has been working very diligently. We're getting ready to roll that out with the beginning of the new school year. And our promise and the board's charge was that would be a break-even program, and we're very confident that we'll be able to do that. But there will be a new fund that's included in our budget this year to show the revenue and expense related to the facility usage program. I would also point out that salaries and benefits account for 85% of our budget. And so we had an opportunity to have conversations with the board in December, and at that time presented our proposal. We got direction from the board that we would have essentially a status quo staffing plan for fiscal year 19. And that's what was approved in January of this year. And so in a certain sense, 85% of our budget was committed in January when the board approved our staffing plan. I think that's important to know. We did make a determination as a board to strategically use our fund balance to support what we felt were important expenditures in fiscal year 19, including the salary increases for our staff members. So when we talk about the $2.7 million surplus that was generated in fiscal year 17, those are the funds that we have committed to support some of the new expenditures that are included in fiscal year 19. And of course, when we're talking about salaries, those will be ongoing expenditures, which is why we have to be very judicious about what we're, at the level that we're able to support. And then there are, every year, typical variances in revenue and expense, and although we have budgeted a $4.6 million deficit, it's likely that we won't end the year with a $4.6 million deficit. And I have some slides that we'll get to in just a moment that I think will help to clarify what we're talking about. So I want to talk a little bit about fund balance. So this is, I think, some great data to look at. This is the set of school districts that we typically compare ourselves to. So of course the 5 St. Charles County school districts, and then we include Rockwood, Parkway, and Pattonville in that mix as well. So you can see that Orchard Farm has, and this is based on 2016-17 data from the ASBR. So this is data that's reported to the state in the same way by all school districts. And so this is the data from that report. So Orchard Farm had 40% fund balances, Wentzville had almost 35% fund balances, Pattonville had 34%, St. Charles almost 33% fund balances, and they did have the 21.8%. And so there are a couple districts who have balances slightly less than that, but we clearly aren't an outlier on the high side in terms of the amount of fund balance that we carry. And this just shows graphically over time what's happened with Francis Howell's fund balance, the same numbers that we looked at previously, but just presented a little bit different ways. You can see that our fund balances have actually kind of declined, and of course this is a projection of where we would end next fiscal year. So the board policy requires that we maintain a minimum fund balance of 15 to 20%. And that's very important because we do reach a low point with our fund balances prior to getting our tax revenue in December, and it's very important that we have those resources available so that we don't have to borrow money to meet our operating expenses. And so it's also important to note, I think, as our expenditures increase, the amount of fund balance that we need to maintain may also increase. Because the amount of expenditures that will occur in that 6-month period between the beginning of a fiscal year and the receipt of our property tax revenue, as those expenses go up, that 15 to 20% will need to be adjusted somewhat in order to accommodate that. And this is just a graphic representation. I think sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. We've tried to explain this on various occasions, but this is actually tracking what happens with our fund balance. So if we, this is the first month of the fiscal year, if you will look at that way. So when we get to November and December, we have hardly any fund balance left. We understand that. And in fact, this is taking a look at actual cash in the bank at that time. And we try to be very strategic about paying certain of our large expenditures. We may hold those checks for a little bit in order to maintain our cash position. And so this is a cycle that is repeated every year. So you can see that if you take a look at what happens in January, we got a lot of money. But you have to think about what the total cycle is. So as we get to June, it's about here, and that decline continues through those first 6 months of the fiscal year. And as we get into December, we really are cash poor until that influx of property tax revenue. So that just is an illustration of why it's important to maintain an appropriate level of fund balance. It helps us to level out the peaks and valleys that come as a result of the way that the majority of our revenue comes to us. So now I'd like to spend a little bit in talking about, how are we going to actually end this fiscal year? What can we expect as we move forward? So take a look at some of our forecast documents. This is information that I shared with the board last year in June. At this time last year, I would have had a conversation with the board showing them what I thought was going to happen. So we had a forecast that I produced showing that our revenue was going to be about 1% more than what we had budgeted in the revised budget, and that our expenditures were going to be just about 1% under what we had budgeted. And so you can see that these are big numbers, and so small, relatively small changes have a big impact on the bottom line. So you can see that in the revised budget, we were still showing a $1.9 million deficit, but here with the June forecast, we were always showing a $1.7 million surplus. When we actually ended the fiscal year, these are, and this is taken directly from the financial statements, but these are actual numbers. We were a little bit better than what we thought. So I said it was going to be about 1%, our revenue was going to be about 1% higher, but it was 1.4% higher. And our expenditures were going to be about 1% under what we budgeted, and they were 1.2% under budget. So not as, if you would allow me the latitude, I would say not a significant difference from what we had shared with the board previously. And so as we now take a look at what's going to happen this year, so I created this just a few days ago, we would expect that, and I will share some information in a sec, but that our revenue would be about 1.6% higher than what was included in the revised budget, and that our expenditures would be about 1.1% lower than what I included in the revised budget. So while we had shown that there was going to be about a $600,000 surplus, revenue over expense for this year, that might be closer to 5.6. Well, I do want to make an adjustment. Now, this takes into account the fact that $1.7 million of that is a financial institution tax, which was a unique occurrence. So adjusting for the financial institution tax, which I think is a fair thing to do, our revenue would be about 0.7% greater than what we had budgeted. And again, our expenditures wouldn't be changed, so down 1.1% below what we had budgeted. And so if you adjust out the financial institution tax, we would go from $600,000 surplus to about $3.9 million surplus. So a little bit higher than last year, but again, we're talking about very big numbers here, and so small changes in those have a very big impact here. And so while we had been projecting about a 19.8% fund balance, we'll probably end up at about a 22% fund balance for the end of this year. And again, any revenue over expense is an opportunity for the board to again consider that those would be funds that we could allocate to future expenses, including salary increases and so forth. And then this takes that same information but tries to project out what might happen as a result of playing out certain scenarios. If we, and I always share that information with the board at the budget workshop. So again, we've seen these numbers before, the revised budget. And then where we are with our preliminary budget and how that might play out as we go forward. So a fairly level amount of deficit here, but again, beyond fiscal year 19, this doesn't reflect any changes, any significant increases in our salary expenditures. So as has been our practice, we haven't built into the scenarios any simulated increases in salary expense. So to the extent that we would have some increase in salary expense, these numbers would certainly. Vicki, I just pressed out.
Oh.
So to the extent that we would have some changes in our salaries, that would certainly have an impact on what the numbers here would be. And so I wanted to just show you, we would have some concern about this level of fund balance, but I always take an opportunity at this point to share with the board. These are only projections based on a very limited set of data. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with state revenue. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with inflation, which is a driver of what we might see in terms of our property tax revenue. And so we make some assumptions on past experience, and to the extent that that's a predictor of the future, we can have some conversation about what the validity of the projections are as we get out to fiscal year '24. But it's a way for us to take a look at our overall picture and a long-range view of that. And I do have copies of this available because it's a little easier for the board to see. But this is taking the forecast instead of the revised budget so that we can begin to get a picture of what that impact has on the funding. So if we take a look at our forecast and we assume that we're going to have that growth in revenue and that underspending as I predicted, we're going to end up with a little bit better than 23%, almost 24% fund balance. And then as we move that forward, even though we have that $4.6 million deficit, which likely won't exist at the end of the fiscal year, we would still end the year with a 20% fund balance. So the board can feel very comfortable with the decisions that it's made relative to this budget, because I don't think in the short term, and you can even see how, as you begin to project that out, it has a positive effect as we carry those numbers across. So, I've done a lot of talking and managed to only get out of the slideshow one time. Thank you, Vicki, for helping with that. So I'd be glad to answer the board's questions.
So Kevin, I'll start if you can hear me. One of the questions I had was regarding the debt service levy as it drops off, and we use that for potentially use that for capital projects in the future. Is that reflected in your budget at all, or is it just kind of set aside because it may be money spent?
Well, it's not reflected in the budget, and it certainly does not affect our operating funds. We do have a budget for debt service, and so the debt service budget, which is a separate fund, does reflect the changes that we would see over time.
Okay, thank you.
But not any increase in expenditure. We only reflect the debt service as we know it today, and what we know will happen in future years.
In the future years.
Yes.
Also, a question about the budget for the facility rental. Right now, I think you have about 29,000 over expenses. I look forward to seeing that come through, and I hope it's more than that. We've talked about quite a bit of potential. I think we've got the right person in the position, so I look forward to hopefully seeing that as a higher number.
We had Marvin has had some great conversations with organizations who've shown a great deal of interest in use of our facilities, and we're very hopeful that we will be able to exceed what the budget would show for this year. The plan all along would be that we would use any surplus generated there to support the programs that are making it possible for us to make that money. So if you're going to be renting our baseball field, we'll probably reinvest some money in our baseball fields to keep them in a condition where people would like to continue to rent them. Now, the upside of that is monies that we're currently budgeting on the operating side could be repurposed to some other use as we're able to support that work through the facilities usage budget.
Thank you. Board, any other questions for Kevin?
I have a couple questions, Kevin. Number one, reduction in Title I and Title II programs. That's federal money.
That is federal money.
And so we're losing there in federal money. And number two, the early childhood ADA, which children will we count? I mean, ECSC children, yeah, I know.
So the simple answer is that you can include up to 4% of your ADA of kids who are in early childhood who, if they were in a K-12 program, would qualify for free or reduced lunch.
Oh, okay.
So you're right, part of your question, as I understand it, would be, we can't double count, so we can't get paid for early childhood special ed.
Right.
And count them in our ADA, and I would say that that is
We
true.
tried that about 20 years ago. It didn't work so well. It was kind of a disaster.
Hashtag too soon.
That really was not, that was not the issue.
No, right.
There certainly was an issue, but it was not that.
Yeah, right, right.
So DESE has a very prescriptive set of requirements.
Okay.
That we can be counted.
That makes sense.
So we're hoping that it will be a positive number for us, and we'll be able to increase our state aid as a result of being able to count those kids.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Kevin, I think the information you presented was excellent, very thorough, so I don't have any additional questions myself either.
So our goal at this point then, Mrs. Ryleman and I want to thank Cindy for the tremendous amount of work that she does on the budget document. We will spend the time between now and the June 7th meeting refining, tweaking the text that goes along with our budget document and checking for those formula errors that might creep in from time to time. But the essence of what we presented tonight, both in this presentation and the document that was attached to board docs, that essentially captures what our budget presentation will be for the first reading at the June 7th meeting, and then on the 21st would be approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Supple.
Thank you.
Board next on our agenda is superintendent comments.
Bear with me, we have a few end of the school year celebrations. The 2018 U.S. News and World Report high school rankings have been released, and all 3 of our comprehensive high schools were named to this prestigious list of best high schools in Missouri. Rankings evaluated more than 500 public high schools in Missouri and 20,000 nationwide. Francis Howell High School, Francis Howell North, and Francis Howell Central were all in the top 25 list in Missouri, and were also ranked in the top 2,500 high schools in the nation. This year, 2 more Francis Howell School District students, Riley Lawson of Francis Howell North and Michael Yu of Francis Howell Central, have scored a perfect 36 on the ACT test. Only 1/10 of 1% of the students who take the ACT earn a perfect 36 on the test. So to see that multiple Francis Howell school district students reach perfection again this year is amazing. Independence Elementary has been honored as the winner of the 2018 Champions for Character Service Recognition Award. This award was developed through a partnership between Character Plus and the Cardinals Care program. Independence was honored for their excellence in service learning, combining community service with learning objectives, the only school selected to receive this award this year. We're never going to get through superintendent comments.
Sorry. Okay, no more. Stop it.
On Thursday, March 3rd, more than 80 high school students from all 3 Francis Howell School District high schools presented their Project Lead the Way capstone projects for review as part of the first annual Francis Howell School District PLTW showcase at Schneider Electric in O'Fallon, Missouri. Capstone projects were showcased to the public in an open house format, and students shared their research and demonstrated their findings to those in attendance. In addition, students also presented their independent research projects to a judging panel of industry professionals with a follow-up question and answer session. The first Francis Howell North Photo Boys project was held on May 11th to provide students with a platform for presenting their ideas on a variety of different topics. Students shared photographs that represented the things they like about their school, as well as things they don't like. The intent of the Photo Boys was to celebrate student and school success and to offer ideas on how to positively impact areas that may need improvement. Bonnie Gens, a 3rd grade teacher at Becky David Elementary, has been awarded the KPLR TV Tools for Teachers grant. KPLR Television, in partnership with Weber Chevrolet, has been offering local teachers who are nominated by community members $500 to use in their classroom as a sign of appreciation for the dedication and selflessness of these often unheralded public servants. Francis Howell School District high school students had the opportunity to hear from Dr. Bernice King, the daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King. Dr. King was in St. Charles to speak in honor of the 50th anniversary of the passage of the 1968 Federal Fair Housing Act and to celebrate April as Fair Housing Month. Thanks to Michelle Walker, Francis House School District Board Member and Realtor, for arranging this opportunity for our students. Realtors actually picked up the tab for that outing. While I realize tensions are high as we end the school year, there has been much to celebrate and be thankful for. As was mentioned, our students had a great year. We have many celebrations and have overcome many challenges. I hope everyone has a restful summer and takes time to enjoy their families.
Great, thank you very much. Lots to celebrate. Board, next on our agenda is board requests. Is there any topics to be included in our future agendas for discussion? Board requests. Good, okay. If we can take a look at our upcoming meeting, our June 7th meeting. Is there anything to be added or changed? Mrs.
Ms.
Simcoe?
Coates, we may bring forward a conversation about contingency staffing for our certified staff as we look at elementary enrollment. And so we may have a request for the board in early June.
Okay, thank you. Any other additions or corrections? Okay. Board, take a look at the June 21st meeting. Is there anything to add or change? Okay, that looks good as well. Board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Lang, seconded by Mrs. Stiglich, by roll call.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you all. Have a good night.